there was an attack on my grandparents by the Taliban, and during that period my granddad passed away. We were quite poor in Afghanistan. My dad, what he would do, he would get a basket, and in the basket there would be like samosas and there would be like savories and food and things like that, and he would go around every street saying, like, you know, calling out names like this is available to buy. I've never really learned ABC or anything. Like, we didn't go to school, we didn't go to anything. It was quite a bit of task for my dad, eventually, you know, going through different places, different countries to get over here. I think it took us around 2 months. When I was in school, a lot of kids used to come up to me. They used to touch my skin like, what is this weird person? They used to look at my little juda. But when it comes to adults, they used to throw stones at my dad. There was a lot of racism that used to happen at my dad. I'm not Punjabi, I'm Afghan. There was a bit of racism within the community as well. They used to call us Pape, they used to call us different names because we weren't Punjabi. Did my high school in London, then went to college, then went to university. A guy called Hamish, he reached out to me. He wanted to shoot me for this magazine called Love magazine. It's like a big magazine in Paris. I shot that, and within 2 weeks I was doing London Fashion Week. This is during 2018.
Wow.
So my first ever show during London Fashion Week, I was playing tabla for a brand. Since then I haven't really looked back. I've always been in spaces of fashion with big names. I have done Charles Jeffrey, Pronouns. Yeah, I did a lot of magazine shoots. So I did GQ, Esquire, Shown. And then after 2020, I did a lot of campaigns. And then eventually I got to shoot with Louis Vuitton.
No, you've come a long way from not speaking any English to learning the language to working in a field that is not very common for a lot of people actually. And then making a mark in that field. That is incredible. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Rising Immigrant Show. I'm your host Jasmine Kaur, and today's episode brings a story of resilience, creativity and breaking boundaries. I have with me Karanjee Gaba, who is the first Afghan Sikh model to model for a major luxury brand, Louis Vuitton. And he's also a filmmaker, and recently he achieved a big milestone which is close to his heart. He is the first person in his family to graduate with a degree. So please allow me to welcome Karanjee Gaba. Welcome to the show, Karanjee.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate the words that you've said about me.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you're here with me today. I just wanted to get to know you better. I know you're visiting New York City for a very short period of time, and a friend actually introduced us, and I thought such a great idea. Like, I wanted to really sit down with you and get to know you. So tell me, where were you born, and what was life like as a child?
So I was born in Afghanistan, and life in Afghanistan is very abrupt for Sikhs, especially like, you know, youngers like us, because during my parents' time, Afghanistan was totally different. They had more flexibility of going out and doing a lot more things because terrorism wasn't as major. But when I was living there, and even now, the whole country is occupied by, you know, terrorists. Some people do kind of prefer that in a way, only because they have more control and they can, you know, live more happily. Okay. But for us, especially as Sikhs, it's a bit more difficult because we are literally in a country where it's very hard for us to kind of like practice our faiths. So when I was a kid living there, we weren't really allowed to leave our house as much. The only place that we would probably go to is the Gurdwara. The majority of the food that we used to have was at home. We used to kind of grow our own food.
Oh, really?
So we had like a massive garden at the back, and majority of people in Afghanistan, they have their own gardens and things. It was very weird, but we were blessed that, you know, we were with the family and we were with everyone. But eventually in 2007, there was a bit of an attack on my grandparents by the Taliban, and during that period my granddad passed away. And it was quite a shock for my dad he's like, if that's something happening to his parents, imagine that happening to your kids.
Right.
So it was like a big take for my dad, and he decided we have to, flee the place and go to somewhere we can educate ourselves, where we can live a better life. So we eventually, I think my dad literally sold everything, and he could, whatever he could do, he made the decision to leave, and we came to UK in 2007.
So what was your dad doing in Afghanistan? What did he do for work?
So there was various different things. We were quite poor in Afghanistan. My dad, what he would do, he would get a basket, and in the basket there would be like samosas, and there would be like savories and food and things like that, and he would go around every street saying, like, calling out names, like, this is available to buy. So this is something which my dad did. And then my granddad, I think he had a little shop opposite the Gurdwara over there. And yeah, so even in the UK, so my dad doesn't work anymore, but we did used to have a store in UK as well, and he carried on kind of like the legacy of, the same business which they used to do in Afghanistan. Now they kind of like carried it on in London. And not just my dad, majority of the Afghan Sikh, the Afghan community, whatever they have learned in Afghanistan, they've kind of brought it into the UK and other places, whichever they visit.
So were the women in your family working in Afghanistan? No. And when did you guys move to the UK? 2007. And as soon as you get there, what was it like? And how did you get there in the first place?
So we traveled through different cities and different places. My dad would probably know better than I do. But all I remember, because I was such a kid, I was like around 8-9 years old.
Okay.
I do have some sort of memory, but I don't really exactly know, like, different places that we went to. But we ended up like, getting on the plane or something right at the end and coming over here. It was quite a bit of task for my dad, eventually, going through different places, different countries to get over here. I think it took us around 2 months or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, something like that.
That's a very long time. And do you have any other siblings?
I have 2 older sisters. They're both married. And even for my sisters, they weren't really allowed to leave the house, even at like,
back home in Afghanistan
as well. It was quite hard for them. But when we got to in UK, so the first place we actually lived was Liverpool.
Okay.
It's like up north of UK. It was quite racist during 2007, but eventually I went to a school there. So I've never really learned ABC or anything. Like, I'm not educated. Well, during that time, I was not educated at all.
So when you moved from Afghanistan to UK, you weren't in school in Afghanistan?
No. We didn't go to school. We didn't go to anything.
So you stayed at home?
Yeah. The only thing that we learned was Punjabi. That's literally it.
And that's from your parents or grandparents?
Yeah. So the original language that we speak is Hindko. So Hindko, in the translation is, Hind means India and Ko means mountain. So the language essentially comes from the mountains of India, which traveled during Muhammad Ghaznavi time. So he was the person who conquered India nearly 10 times.
Is it different from Pashto or Farsi?
Yes.
Okay.
So during his time, so you can say it's more like Multani.
Acha,
yeah, it's slightly different. It has a different twang to it, and then that's what we speak at home. But the language which we speak is actually older than our religion. So it's nearly 1,000 years old language, but there's no transcription, there's no written elements to it or anything. But it's something which we have kept. But eventually now it is kind of dying down, because whichever country that you go from, the kids, they tend to learn the language.
So did they originally move from Punjab?
No.
Okay.
No. So there's a lot of sakya about how Sikhism was established in Afghanistan. One of the major ones which we believe that did happen, there's 3 theories. So one is Maharaja Ranjit Singh, when he was fighting against Afghanistan. That's when Sikhism established. Second one is people converted into Sikhism, and third one is when Guru Nanak Dev Ji went to Baghdad during his period. He left disciples in Afghanistan. So during that period, there was a lot of Sindhis, and there was a lot of businessmen. So even Khatris, so there's a lot of Khatris during that period, and even the surnames were like Khaneja, Arora, and even like my surname is Gaba, but a lot of my family that we know, they have surnames like Arora, Nagpal. It's like
similar to the surnames we see back in India.
Back in India as well, and in the history of it. Yeah. So a lot of those people, they were businessmen and they were accountants, which is what Afghan Sikhs are today. Majority of them are all businessmen, and they've been carrying on the same, the history and the traditions and everything that we know about.
So you said you learned a little bit of Punjabi at home. What about English? So when you got to the UK, did you speak any English?
No.
So what was that like for you?
It was strange. It's like going to a country where everyone sees you as an alien, because no one has ever, because it's firstly a racism country during that period. There's not a lot of even Asians there in Liverpool. So for me, when I was in school, a lot of kids used to come up to me. They used to touch my skin like, what is this weird person? They used to look at my little juda. And it was quite a strange feeling. But they never judged me. They understood that I was someone who was different, but they still accepted me. These I'm saying as kids. But when it comes to adults, they used to throw stones at my dad. There was a lot of racism that used to happen at my dad. So eventually when we did move from one country to another to feel safe, we didn't really feel safe until we got to to London, sorry.
To London.
Yeah.
Maybe because it's a little bit more diverse and there's more acceptability of different cultures.
Yes, there is. But at the same time, because I'm not Punjabi, I'm Afghan. There was a bit of racism within the community as well.
Oh, within the community as well?
Yeah, because they used to call us Pape. They used to call us different names because we weren't Punjabi. So there was one time they didn't allow us to go to the Gurdwara. They were like, you're Afghan, go to the Afghan Gurdwara, why are you here?
Really?
So
that's the strangest thing I've ever heard. Like,
we're Sikhs eventually, like Guru Nanak Dev Ji. One thing which I've learned throughout my history and throughout my career is, doesn't matter wherever we're from, we're all Sikhs and we're all human to begin with. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji actually got rid of, the caste system and everything. And essentially, even till today, we are comparing ourselves and we are telling one another, you are this, you're that. But we're Sikhs. Why can't we just accept one another as Sikhs rather than labeling ourselves?
That's absolutely right. But as a matter of fact, a Gurdwara is a place that is supposed to be open to everybody, irrespective of their caste, religion, race. That was the whole point of establishing the concept of like langar and establishing the concept of pangat, that you sit with people who you do not know and who you're not familiar with. So you get a sense of like who they are and like sharing that, humanity or celebrating the oneness in all of us. Now, you said a lot of kids came up to you, touched you, wanted to know a little bit more about you. Now, how do you navigate this cultural sort of shock, like difference in language, difference in the way you look from others? It was so
difficult. It was one of the hardest thing I've done in my life, like because I did not know how to read and write. So if you see there's like a book there or they've written something on the board, I will literally write in the same manner. Like,
so you just copy it.
But even if it's like opposite, I would write in the opposite way. Like, I don't know what's right and wrong, but eventually over time, by watching films and watching, like, I think when I got to in Birmingham, we used to go to Punjabi school there. And I learned a bit there as well, like, translation from Punjabi to English. And eventually I got to learn more and more day by day. Even if you even if you ask me to write an essay in English today, I don't think I can. It's very hard for me. Like, the trouble which I get is I don't know where to put the commas.
But you speak such fluent English. No one, I don't think anybody can tell that it was hard for you.
Eventually over time, it came. But to begin with, it was very difficult.
I can imagine.
Very difficult. But during that period, I wasn't able to communicate. I wasn't able to tell them who I was. It was there was such like massive differences. But that was literally, I used to go there, try to learn something, but I used to come back home not knowing anything. And that happened for nearly 6 or 7 months.
Wow.
And
So what was going on at home at this time? Like, how are your parents taking this transition?
so so for my parents, the difficult part was to prove that we're Afghans. Because when we arrived at this country, like my parents, they both speak Farsi and Dari. So like I wanted to learn Farsi and Dari, like myself. I probably know a bit of here and there,
Okay.
but because obviously I don't live in the country anymore, and I was very young when we left, so I don't exactly know any of it. But for my parents, they know all of it, and they needed to kind of like, you know, tell the government that we are Afghans, believe me. So they, in their head, it was more of the, you know, the transition and having to prove ourselves that we're not from, you know, any other place, but we're Afghans. So for them, it was more about that. We didn't have any visa. We didn't have anything. We couldn't really go to work. So for about 4 or 5 years, that was literally it for us. We lived in a country where we were given like vouchers to eat food. And we lived in one place for nearly 5 years, and then, it was quite a big transition. But eventually, when we got our visa, we all came to, you know, London. Things started to settle in. Did my high school in London.
Very
then
nice.
went to college. Then went to university. Yeah.
So what did you study at university?
Film.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you pick films?
Funny enough, I didn't pick film. Film picked me. Reason why? Because when I was in school, I was in like year 10 or year 11. There's a guy called the Afghan Dutch Sikh. So he's a documentary filmmaker. And during 2012, the Olympics took place in London, and there's someone called Bhai Fauja Singh, and he's a marathon runner. He's like 101 years old or 102 years old during that time.
Very inspirational.
So we were there, and he wanted me to take some videos of him running around and do some videos.
You've met him?
I didn't get to meet him, but I was there taking Actually, I don't remember. I think I did meet him. But yeah, I took some videos of him, which was kind of used in the documentary. And then he saw that I had some sort of an eye for the camera of directing of some sort. And eventually, I was working for Sikh Channel at the age of 15, 16. Then I went to make a documentary in Belgium for Afghans, refugees in Belgium. And then eventually I went to Pakistan in 2019 and then 2021. So I made films of Guru Nanak Dev, like I made a film about the history of Guru Nanak Dev Ji in Pakistan.
Very interesting.
It's on YouTube to watch. And then I made a documentary about the language which we speak, Hindko, which I learned about myself in 2018. So during all this time, I had no idea what I was speaking, because neither it was Punjabi, neither it was Hindi. So it was like I'm infused of a lot of other languages in mix. That's what kind of like, that's what life took me. And then eventually modeling as well, where I'm able to, you know, explore my identity, let other people know about who I am, who the people are, and what Sikhism is. So it's a lot of mixed things, but they all are much focused in media.
How did the transition from making films to modeling happen? Is it happening at the same time, or did you start being a model first? Like, how did that come out?
So I was always a film director or like a film producer in a way. I was always behind the camera. But then eventually in 2016/2017, one of my friends, he wanted to kind of, wanted to take some photos and stuff. And I wanted to teach him. And then eventually I came in front of the camera and I was like, I'll be the subject. Then there's a guy called Pardy Bhara, Sing Street Styles, very big in UK. So he did like a massive campaign for Samsung during that time. And obviously everyone knows Waris Ahluwalia as well. Yeah. He's one of the biggest, inspiration for many of us. So I saw that was happening during that time as well. And eventually Pardeep told me to come meet him. Okay. And it was more like, like a community-based photo shoot where a lot of Sikhs gather together and they take pictures and things. So we got to do that. But my idea was that I wanted to be in mainstream media to make a change. Eventually, I had some pictures that was of me. And I posted it on Model Mayhem, which was like a big portal back in the days. And a guy called Hamish, he reached out to me. He wanted to shoot me for this magazine called Love magazine. It's like a big magazine in Paris. I shot that, and within 2 weeks, I was doing London Fashion Week. This is during 2018.
Wow.
So my first ever show during London Fashion Week, I was playing tabla for a brand. Yeah, and since then, I haven't really looked back. I've always been in spaces of fashion with big names. I'm really fortunate enough to be in those spaces and being able to represent myself and Sikhi at the same time. And yeah, that's the transition that took place in 2018. And since then, I've been doing that alongside with a lot of filming and making
That's incredible.
films.
How does it make your parents feel?
So majority of, my parents don't really know what I do in fashion. Like I told them I was in Vogue and they're like, huh? They're like, yeah.
Like, what does that even mean?
They don't know because they've never really,
They must be so proud of you.
The only time they got to know when I'm doing something is when someone goes up to them, be like, oh, we saw your son's picture here and there. And they're like, okay, amazing. But for them, they don't really care. The only thing they've asked me in mind, they're like, doesn't matter what you do, as long as you keep your Sikhi and as long as you keep jumping Naam and as long as you're in that space where you're not letting go of yourself in a way. They're like, we're happy. They don't really care what I do in life. It's just a matter of they more kind of care about me being Sikh. Because we suffered a lot in Afghanistan. We suffered a lot. We didn't have any restrictions. We had the freedom of, we didn't have freedom of religion. We didn't have freedom of for lots of things. And being in a country where we have a freedom for a lot of things, we're unable to kind of look after ourselves in a way. I'm not saying I'm against anyone or anything like that.
No, I get it. It's good for me to understand.
It's just my parents' opinion on me,
Right.
and because of they've had the experience, and they're just like, for me personally, doesn't matter what I do. It's just as long as I keep my Sikhi and keep representing, it makes them happy.
That makes sense, and it's also like your guiding light, probably something that drives you from within. So, wearing a dastar, having a kirpan. What does that mean in the fashion industry? So
fashion is very new to all of this. And the way we can tell them more about Sikhi is through baby steps. The moment I take my kirpan, I'll show them, look, I have a knife. First thing they would be like, yo, what's going on? Because it's a big crime to have a knife on you anyways. But having a kirpan obviously is not a crime, but for them, they don't really know about it. So the first thing is we need to teach them more about what is a Sikh and what's the background of Sikhism essentially. And then eventually when the time comes right, there will be more Sikhs with kirpans. There will be more Sikhs, keeping their dadi and keeping their bug and being able to represent the true identity of Sikhism in fashion eventually. But because it's very hard for a lot of Sikhs and it's very hard to fit in. Like personally, I've been asked to shave, I've been asked to do a lot of things and I've turned it down. But they have respected me for turning it down and still being able to keep myself in that spaces. It's a big thing.
Right.
And I don't say that everyone can kind of do that, because everyone is in different position on their journey into Sikhi and into fashion and into their career. But eventually I do believe that through baby steps and letting them know who we are, we don't not all Sikhs drink, not all Sikhs eat meat heavily. It's just changing the small perception, and after that they'll be able to understand us better. But from the first day where they tell us, all Sikhs are heavy drinkers, why don't you drink with us? And then carrying that on and making us think that all of us are like that, I think that's when the problem gets created. Because I was on a shoot on a Tuesday and the first thing he was asked, can you shave? It's a big thing. And I just had to kind of tell them, not everyone is like that. It's a bit of a change. And then he got to know that everyone is slightly different.
Right. There's
And
a
that's
lot of
just-
diversity in the community itself. Like, I come from Punjab, and even within Punjab, there's a lot of diversity.
Yeah.
Diversity in terms of the way we look, diversity in terms of the way we eat, what we eat, our, other choices outside of home. It's very different. So
Very
I guess,
different,
yeah.
of course. I'm not here to object anyone on how it's like, everyone has their own choice of what you want to eat, how you want to look, how you want to represent yourself. But personally, me, the way I want to represent is the true identity, because reason why, if tomorrow, like, for example, your child looks at me and he sees that, okay, I look in a certain way, and they want to kind of carry that on. But it's not the exact reality of Sikhism. It has a bad impact, or has a bad kind of, how do I say, an image. Like, if let's just say Guru Gobind Singh Ji was trimming his beard, how is that going to have an impact on the kids? It's just that, I think, if I'm representing myself in a very major, fashion is something which not just myself, the whole world looks at.
Right.
I just want to make sure I'm not kind of representing myself in the wrong way, for example, and I don't want someone to think of Sikhs in the wrong manner. That's the major thing. Again, I don't want anyone to feel bad, or I'm not saying that.
But it's your perspective, and I completely appreciate that. And what you're trying to do with your work is incredible, and we're all proud of you.
Thank you so much.
How did Louis Vuitton happen for you?
Louis Vuitton, it was a major thing. So 2 months before Louis Vuitton happened, I was at my friend's house, and we were looking at a book of a photographer called Tim Walker. So Tim Walker is the biggest and literally an icon of a photographer in the fashion industry.
Okay.
He's not on Instagram, but his followers, his influencers and his, how do you say, his fan following is like over 300, 400K. That's just a fan following, not even himself. And so 2 months before we were doing that, he was telling me about him and everything. And then 2 months later, on a Sunday, I didn't get a call from an agency. I got a call from the casting director, reached out to him on Instagram. They're like, we're trying to book you for a shoot tomorrow. Are you available? It was very last minute. And because it was a Sunday, my agency was obviously not open. I had to reach out to my agency. I had to sort everything out last minute. And then eventually I got to shoot with Louis Vuitton, and I got to work with Tim Walker, which was like, whoa, it's like a massive deal. And it was such a amazing experience. The team was huge. Like, I was working in nearly a 100,000 square foot studio.
Okay.
It's like, wow.
We just get to see the picture. So what goes on behind the scenes? Like, how photo shoot like that put together?
It's like you have massive sets, and not just one, you have multiple sets. You have like a massive cafeteria for food. Yeah, we had like a different set of where we were changing our clothes. So I got to, I was there at like 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. And then I left home at like 8 or 10 p.m. It was crazy long day. Sometimes it's not about how many clothes you wear. I think it's more about how they kind of set up the studio, the team, and obviously when you have more models, it's much more different. But it was an amazing team. I'm in still in touch with 2-3 people that I got to work with at the shoots, and being able to work with such big deals and so many talented, creatives. It's huge. And sometimes you don't know yourself, like, is this really real? Like, you have to kind of like pinch yourself, like, whoa.
So how has life changed after that photo shoot?
A lot of people got to know about me. A lot of people started appreciating my work more, because before that, although I did Primark, I was still here, like I was still doing a lot of things, but Louis Vuitton is like a massive, massive name.
Sure.
And it changed a lot of people's perspective, because we were seeing Sikhs in different places. And my idea was that, I want to be in the mainstream fashion. Then eventually being there, it kind of, a lot of people came to me. They're like, we're very proud to see a Sikh representative in that major brand. And I want to carry that on, and I want to make sure, like a lot of people, a lot of youth gets to see. And we sometimes, and you can be whoever you are, and you can you can do whatever you want in life. Whenever you put your faith into it and your mind to it, I'm pretty sure you can achieve anything. It's just the matter of time,
Right.
patience, and just working towards that goal.
No, you've come a long way from not speaking any English to learning the language to working in a field that is not very common for a lot of people, actually, and then making a mark in that field. That is incredible. That's huge.
Thank you.
Absolutely love that. So if you were to say a few things to somebody who wants to get started in the fashion industry as a model, what would you say to them?
There is good, and I'm going to say this: fashion isn't easy. It's not an easy industry. It's not something where you can say like, I want to become a model straight away. I can get into it. There's a lot of like when I started, there was no one there. So for me, maybe I had a better maybe like a fast track or something like that. But now the industry has changed dramatically. It's more diverse, but they're much more pickier with who they choose. Reason why, like one of the main reasons why I'm in fashion is because I have a really good height. Like I'm 6'1". Anyone below 5'11", the agencies eventually don't work with them. Secondly is how confident you are as a person in yourself, and how much time are you willing to give to fashion for it to work for you. Because I know so many models that done one job or two jobs, and after that they haven't worked for nearly 6 months or 7 months, and then they're like, because we haven't worked for 7 months, I'm going to give up, I'm going to do something else. And eventually maybe you could have gotten work on the 8th month, but because they've already given up on that 7th month, they've kind of moved away. In fashion, it takes time. Like I didn't do my first ever major campaign until 2021, and I've been in the industry for nearly 2017. For me,
Takes a while.
it takes time. Like entertainment industry takes time. You cannot become a huge deal in overnight. It takes time. Eventually, someone who is willing to work in fashion, you have to understand that it takes faith, it takes patience. You have to trust yourself, you have to trust the process. Because if the moment you don't trust the process, you're not ready for it. You're not ready for that. So it's difficult. But again, there's different routes to how to become a model. Like even if you don't have a good height, there's like influencing, modeling. You can become an influencer online, and through there you can work with different brands. You can become a magazine model as well. So I love editorials. Again, you don't need a height restriction or anything, but it allows you to work with different brands, different teams in magazine. Majority of this work is unpaid, but somewhere you do get paid for it. For you to work in fashion, you need to allow the fashion world to understand and get to know you. And eventually when they get to know who you are, the work that you have done, let the work speak for yourself.
Right.
And eventually then you get to work with a lot more, major deals.
Got it. So on the surface, it looks all very easy. It looks like you just dressed up and you showed up for some pictures. So kudos for all the hard work that goes behind the scenes, from models preparing themselves for the shoots, to people putting up those extensive sets, to people like shooting it. Now you said there could be a gap between two different photo shoots or two different projects. Now how do you stay sort of relevant or stay motivated in that time period?
Trust me, that's one of the worst parts of modeling. Rejection and not working for nearly 6-7 months. It's a massive thing. You sometimes doubt yourself. You're like, am I really right for this? Is it really going to work out? Is it not going to work out? I am behind on expenses. A lot of models that you see which are trying to make it out there, they are behind on expenses 100 times. Sometimes the money that we probably get is like in dollars, let's say like $200-$300 for like a shoot, which doesn't last you that long.
Sure.
It's good for it's good for in terms of your exposure, people getting to know you, but eventually you will have to work another job side to side until that thing kicks off.
Got it. Is it a specific type of modeling or a specific type of work that makes you the most money? Like, which is more sustainable?
Campaigns.
Yeah.
Campaigns, anything that's advertising makes the most money. Anything such as magazines, catwalks, things like that. It's very good for exposure, but when it comes to money, it's not the greatest. But you have to keep on doing that to stay relevant. Like when I started only from catwalks. I did a lot of catwalks. I have done Charles Jeffrey, Pronouns, Xander Zhao. These are like a lot of names, and like Charles Jeffrey is one of the biggest names in fashion. And then eventually I did a lot of magazine shoots. So I did GQ, Esquire, Shown. And then eventually after 2020, I did a lot of campaigns. Like since then, after 2020, I've been doing a lot of campaigns, a lot of advertising work. But that didn't come to me just straight away.
Right.
You know, things changed, fashion industry changed. And after Black Lives Matter, the industry kind of allowed more diverse models within the fashion industry.
Sure.
And it changed it for a lot of people. And it made, and then eventually, like, even for us, it kind of like, it helped us get to, you know, it helped us being involved in different places where we weren't involved before. So it was very good for us. And even if you are looking to go into modeling, I would say start off with a photographer, start off with someone who's either in fashion or looking to get into fashion, collaborate with other people. You cannot do anything yourself. You need to work with other people. A lot of collaborations.
Got it.
And not turning down anything.
Got it.
But yeah, that's how fashion works.
So you said that since Black Lives Matter, the whole industry has changed and there's a lot more inclusivity. But how real is this inclusivity? Like,
in some places you use that as token. That's it. They need to just make sure that
they've checked the box.
Yeah, there was one of the brands I was casting for, and they needed an Asian model or a South Asian model. I went to the casting and I was there doing everything, and then she goes, "I'm too Asian for the show." So they do want to have an Asian person, but they don't want to have too Asian for a person for some reason. And I was like, whoa. It happens. And sometimes we can't really argue with anyone or tell them to change something because we're not the decision makers. One other thing I do want in fashion, and for a lot of us to do, is become those decision maker. That's what we are lacking. We're not on the big table where, there's big decision makers are. There's a lot of few people who make those decisions, and no one can argue with them. They're the one who's controlling majority of the industry. And, and once we have someone of color stepping up and being on that table, they're able to make a change. But that change will eventually come over time, and it needs to happen.
No, absolutely. And earlier when you mentioned that Varis Ahluwalia was a big inspiration for you, and he was pretty much somebody you looked up to in the industry. And for a lot of people, right? People had never seen a Sikh model on such a major brand campaign. And once he was out there on billboards, there was this huge discussion about representation in the fashion industry and what it does to the community. So it definitely makes sense. But like what you said, that having representation on the tables where decisions are made, that's, I think, all the more important. We need to have more and more people in each industry. So
exactly.
So it can be really inclusive.
Because what I've noticed, a lot of parents, I wouldn't say they're wrong. Like, money is important. But at the same time, we still need to have those representation in media, in fashion, where we see that the world is watching there. Like, don't get me wrong, becoming an accountant and a lawyer is very difficult. Like, I know the paperwork that they go through. I know the works and the hours that they spend at university. It's a huge deal. But at the same time, we need more people in the industry such as fashion, media, journalism, where we don't have a lot of people of color there. And if we are not going to have people of color there, we're not going to be able to make a change worldwide. And representation is going to be very limited, because again, they want to have representation, but they want to have the type of representation that is slightly not true. Or it is true, but it's very like mellow. If you
Or
get
I
what I'm
would
trying
say
to say. It's
surface level.
filtered.
Yeah, surface level representation, but not really like,
Makes an impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we talk about your filmmaking again, you mentioned some great ideas, that the things that you wanted to sort of present in front of people. What are some of the ideas that you still have in mind, or something that you'd like to work on in the future?
In terms of film, so I like capturing history a lot. So traveling in different places, getting to know about the history itself. So my first ever film was called Hindko, which got me, like, I was on BBC, it got channeled on Sikh channel and a lot of like channels as well. It was a big thing as an Afghan Sikh because we haven't got our history. Like, we can't go back home. So the only way we're going to be able to preserve our history is through by talking to people. And that's why I like speaking with, people from our community, getting to know about my language, my identity. Because when I used to go in school, people used to ask me, what do you speak? And I wasn't able to tell them what I speak. And I lost my identity. And I was able to find my identity just by even, speaking with my elderly and getting to know what I speak eventually. So I think I'm working on a lot of ideas of lost history and preserving history as well. So again, currently I'm working on a film about Afghan Sikhs in the background. Going forward, I want to work with Hinduism in Afghanistan.
Okay.
Which is slightly different from Sikhism, but it still matters because eventually Afghanistan was a Hindu and a Buddhist country before it became what it is today. Then I'll be moving into different I'll be working with, Sikhism in different countries and how they kind of, what challenges that they face when they're in a country. Like, for example, over here, I was just at the Gurdwara over here and they were telling us how life changed after 9/11.
Yeah. And
I want to get to know about that more because it has an impact on you as an individual, and I don't know about it because I wasn't here. I have no idea. And those type of feelings and those type of racism that you faced is a major thing in how it has impacted you as a person and the community around here. So these type of stories I want to focus on more, getting to know, and the more you talk to people, the more things you get to learn.
So when you work on such topics, which are very complex and also sensitive, do you ever feel scared? Yes,
I do feel scared because you don't know what's going to happen once you publish that. It can either backlash, it can either someone can say something which, might not be true. Because imagine in a documentary, a lot of the stuff that you're telling me, it's not something which, like, I've researched a lot of things, but eventually I'm not the one answering that. It's the people that I meet, like historians or other people who tell me those things. And when I get to learn about those histories and things, and if by chance they are wrong in any manner, it's going to come back on me.
Yeah, even if it's right, honestly.
It's things like that, but it is quite sensitive because you don't want to board up those traumas. You don't want to bring those memories back. You don't want to make them back into the place that they were before. So you have to be very careful with the type of questions you ask.
When you're out there representing yourself, Sikhism, your culture, through film or through modeling, do you ever fear that being so out there and being very authentic, is it gonna affect you getting work, like, in the future? Do you ever worry about that? Has that ever happened?
I don't know. The reason why, because, for example, if I haven't gotten work, I don't know what's impacted it. And I can't change how someone thinks. I can only change someone's perspective sometimes, you're like, because you don't have the knowledge about something and you're going to think something is like this because you don't have a knowledge of it. And my idea is to change that perspective for you to change your opinion.
Right.
And the only way I can do that is being in those spaces and either through film. And I don't know what has impacted on my work or what hasn't, but I'm never like, whatever I showcase, it's an opinion and it's something which I care about. I'm not against anyone. Sure. I'm not against anyone's opinion about me. Everyone has their own choice of what they think about me. I can't control that. And that's really it. Like, that's what matters to me. Like, I'm able to, sometimes you won't agree with what I agree with, and that's totally fine. You have your own opinion. Sure. I have my own opinion, and I'm happy to take it. But I think if I'm allowing that to happen where, you know, it's your opinion and it only matters to you, you should respect my opinion as well. And that shouldn't really interfere with my work, because it's not about that. It's just that I believe something a bit different. That's literally it. You know, we're in the same, like, we're in the same place, we're in the same medium, we're in the media industry. Like, there's no point me burning any bridges, because I know eventually I'm going to see you. We'd rather get along with things rather than trying to burn, you know, that's something that doesn't exist.
Any brands, any, you know, businesses that you'd like to work with in the future, if you want to say it out loud, just to manifest it? So one of the brands which I really want to work with is Burberry. I've been trying to, well, it's been on the list for a very long time. Other than that, I'm very open to working with everyone. I have no kind of like, no objections or anything. Sure. I know Burberry had a Sikh boy, young Sikh boy as a model. Yeah. My son looked at that and it was very inspiring for him.
It is. I believe it's slightly changing. The industry is changing. So you'll never know who you'll see.
Oh, that's great. Well, more power to you. Thank you so much for coming on my show today and sharing your journey. I wish that you succeed in your life.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And you get whatever you deserve, more than what you deserve. So thank you so much for coming here tonight.
Thank you. I just want to say one last thing is, like, whatever I've said is just my opinion. If I've said anything more or less, or like anything bad that anyone thinks that I'm saying something bad, I really apologize. My idea is not to offend anyone. It's just the fact, like, I just have my own opinion, and, you know, sometimes you have your own perception that you want to do something in a certain way.
Sure.
So everyone has their own.
Don't worry about
choice,
it. You're entitled to your opinions, and this is why we're here. The reason I have this podcast and this platform is for people like you to share their heart out and to tell the world where you come from, what inspires you, what motivates you, how you look at the world. So you're in the right place.
Thank you.
And this is why we have this platform.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me here. It means a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.